and welcome to the Full Throttle Movement. This week on the Full Throttle Movement we have the Kia Optima 2. We've been very nicely loaned the Optima 2 for this week from Kia themselves, which is great. Unfortunately it's not the 2016 model, which I've seen a few car reviews popping out in America where it's been released. This is still a 2015 model, so we'll just need to have a look at this car as it is, hypothesize how the new car is going to be, and pick up maybe on points of improvement for this car, and just generally see where Kia fits in at the moment. A couple of things to start off with on this car. This is the Optima 2, so it's the mid one in the range. There's three choices. So this one has basically the same, everything the same as the top of level one, apart from no sunroof and a few other little bits and pieces. There's one engine choice for the Optima, which is the 1.7 litre diesel engine, 135 horsepower and 325 newton meters of torque. For a little 1.7, it's actually reasonably punchy, although it does have a rather large amount of weight to carry about with this car. Despite it being a mid-size saloon car, this is actually the same size as my E39 5 Series, which I have, and it's actually 1,500, just over 1,500 kilos, which is quite a sizable lump. But yeah, those are the base specs for the car, and let's just see how it goes. As with most four-cylinder diesel engines, it's not the most tuneful of sounds. This one sounds particularly rattly in the low revs, I would say. But once you're up and running and up and moving, the noise isolation in the cabin's pretty good, so you can actually hold a decent conversation without too much of a hassle. And certainly the sound of the engine itself doesn't become a problem. Internally with the car. It's really nice to see that the Kia sat-nav and navigation, basically the navigation entertainment system is actually really good on this car. The actual sound system itself is really good, top quality stuff. Certainly you will not be disappointed with the sound quality from the car. One of the finer points I've noted about this car is its general size on the road. You can't get away from the fact that it is a big car. Kia seem to have made quite an effort in quickening up the steering response to try and make the car feel smaller than actually what it is. Which to me has actually worked quite well. It certainly doesn't feel as big or heavy a car as the 5 Series I normally drive. When you put them side by side, they're pretty much identical in length, wheelbase, and this is actually a little taller. Speaking of height and space, this car is absolutely massive inside. I've got plenty of space above my head, and I don't need to worry at all. And the passengers at the back really don't need to worry about space. It's verging on the superb level of space in the back, which is always a good bonus point. So like I said, this car sits in the middle of the range. It's just over £21,000 on the road. Obviously you get your 7-year Kia warranty, which is a massive selling point for Kia. Vauxhall are offering something comparable, but I think there's a few catches with what they're actually covering in their warranty. Obviously, if you're looking into these cars, that'll be something that you'll want to take note of and compare between the two. The Optima's in quite a difficult category. You've got cars like the well, it's meant to be the small saloon segment, really. So it's the Mondeo, the Insignia, the Passat, that kind of, the Accords, the Avensis, all of these types of cars, which are quite well set up in the marketplace just now. And although the Optima's been out for a few years now, it's starting to establish itself as a proper alternative to these, an alternative to these other cars. So, and quite rightly so. Driving this model here, it's certainly as composed. Well, if we compare it to the MG6 that I drove a few months back, it is as composed on the back roads as the MG6 was. And the only downside I would say is that the little 1.7 diesel engine takes a while to get wound up, and can take a bit of a knock if you have to scrub off any type of momentum. When you build it back up again, it takes a little while. There seems to be like a flat spot in the low revs, and I know that it's a variable geometry turbo, so I was kind of not really expecting that, expecting it to pull pretty much from low revs. So I was surprised to feel that there's a flat spot. Basically, I think it's up until about 1800 revs. It seems to be a flat spot, and that just makes town driving that a little bit difficult. The reason for that is if you pull out from a junction in first, there's a little bit of lag, gives you a lot of boost, and then when you change into second, the leap from first to second is quite large, and it drops the rev range back down into that little band, and then it feels as if you are completely stranded and there's nothing there. Now, I'm pretty sure that it's just a remap, mapping thing. It might even be to do with the emissions for the car, but certainly it's not the most encouraging thing to come across, really. Not very confidence inspiring. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the steering. It is electronically assisted, so like most cars at the moment, they're heading towards electronic assistance because it places less load on the engine itself, because there's no hydraulic pump required. There's no hydraulic pump required to run the power steering itself, so there's less drag on the engine, therefore more efficient. The slight downside is that while it is precise and you can put the car where you want it on the road, there's a bit of substance lacking in the steering itself. So it means that while the suspension is doing all the work and isolating the cockpit from all of the vibration and harshness that you would possibly want through the steering wheel, there's a disconnect between the front wheels and the actual steering wheel itself. Imagine on a dry road like today, it's not really much of an issue, but as soon as you start pushing on, say, in a slightly damp to changeable weather conditions, you're gonna struggle feeling where the limit adhesion is on the front axle. As it is, the car itself is neutrally balanced. It does have a tendency when you're really pushing on for the front end to kind of wash slightly, which is the same with pretty much most cars these days. The only one recently I've driven of this size that was the opposite to that was the Optima VRS, which drove a couple of weeks back, and had a quick taste tour of a couple of weeks back, and it was the opposite. It went into oversteer first. So for me, certainly there's no doubting that it was always going to be a predominantly understeering car. Let's take a look on the outside of the car now. For me, I like it. I like the way it looks. It sits well on the road. It's had a good reception from everyone that I've shown it to. They're all quite affectionate with how it looks. It looks sharp. It fits well. It's a nice modern design. I don't think it's going to age too badly as well. I think it's actually this face, the corporate face, if you like, of the Kia range now. I think it's going to do well for quite a while. It seems to just, fit quite well. I think the new corporate face of most of the new Kia models looks really nice. This one in particular, I think is going to go really well when it's facelifted for next year's car. I've already seen some pictures of that, and it looks really well. It doesn't look old. This design now is what, 4 years old. So some cars, depending on how the design can age quite drastically in that time, but this seems to be fine, to be honest. Although you would expect that with, the car having a 7-year warranty, they're probably expecting a 7-year life cycle out of the car, so they're trying to maybe design it ahead with that in mind. So in terms of driver interaction information, the dashboard itself really well lit out, really clear, especially at night time. The bright white of the bluey white of the dials fits really well, and it's actually not too reminiscent of quite a lot of higher end saloons and even sports cars, really. It's got a nice TFT screen in the middle. A nice screen in the middle, which give you all your information about range and miles to the gallon, etc. This particular car has been easily achieving 47, 48 miles to the gallon and had no problems with it whatsoever. So I know Kia said that it should be doing more than that, but for me, I think if I'm driving a car this size with this small an engine, I'm fully expecting to have maybe a little bit of a hit in terms of miles to the gallon. Always thought people who bought the old 520D were a bit crazy, but this seems to be 45, 46 upwards miles to the gallon with no real concerns. Cockpit isolation is great. There's very little in the way of intrusion of noise, either from the road or from the wind. I think obviously from the wind is quite difficult with this car because it's been consciously designed, I think, to reduce wind noise and improve aero efficiency. There has been some fallout from that, like most modern cars. Visibility has suffered a little bit due to that type of design. So for example, the rear C-pillars are quite thick, but that's to allow for the sloping roof. But they've compensated with that with a large interior mirror and also large wing mirrors as well, which give plenty of visibility out to each side of the car. Certainly you're not going to miss anything if it tries to pass you. Certainly you're never going to miss an Audi driver that's hanging on your backside. So for me, I always look when I first step into a car. There's a couple of points I always try and make sure that I address. There's a couple of points I always try and make sure I address, and number one for me is driving position, because if you're not comfortable in your driving position, you're going to get tired really quickly. You're not going to have enough